I find it interesting to see how people nowadays reflect on how the internet used to be, and not just the internet, but also just technology, in general, like things, small things like the how the old YouTube logo used to look. It used to look like one of those tube TVs, and how we used to remove the batteries from the back of our cell phones. I don't know if you had like one of those old Android like S4s that you drop it and the battery comes flying out. You could do that to turn out the phone. The buttons weren't working. Or about how just like people have changed in the online space in the past 20 or so years that I've been alive, and the other people have experienced it too. Um, and I find it interesting because I grew up during each of these phases of change, where I know a lot of people online, they the fundamental parts of like their childhood growing up were in like the first stage of the internet, like the golden age of YouTube, perhaps. But I saw like the before and after, but I was never really a part of any of them until later on. So I have a vague sense of what it felt like to be in each phase of the internet, but I never know if that was the feeling that I have was caused by the environment in my life at the time, or some widespread sense that was sort of pertinent throughout the internet throughout the entire period, right? So when I started going on the internet was sometimes like 2013, and so it seemed so this is kind of the age where I missed like the golden age of YouTube, where creators like Smosh and Fred and all of the like classic YouTube creators, right? But I mean, I felt their influence like indirectly through other websites. I just wasn't allowed to YouTube back then. But as YouTubers talk really fondly about this era of the internet, era of YouTube, but it's not something I connect with much. Um, so when lived online, like it really was part of my life. It was always like post colonization or post capitalization, I guess. It was no longer like they call it like the Wild West of the internet, where everyone's just kind of fending for themselves. There's no real rules. It's kind of developed by uh, social hierarchies instead. Like there's, but the internet is a place where there are none of the social hierarchies. So it's kind of like developed as its own sort of entity that's separate from the outside world. Whereas nowadays there's ads and corporations and everything on the internet, always looming above. And so I always felt the remnants of this initial side of YouTube. And with it came a sense of distant nostalgia, like a dream that I was born in the 90s, 5 years earlier, so that I could grow up on this side of the internet and take part in this culture and experience the same freedom that other people experience as well. And then eventually become disillusioned with what came next, naturally, instead of being born to the state of dissolution and all these problems. And so it feels like the dissolution feels like it's a normal thing, which I feel like a lot of people can relate to. Though I'm not entirely sure, I believe that this initial state of the internet was similar in nature to how many small communities on the internet interact and feel nowadays. For example, you have some like backwater forum. Forums used to be really big, but now you just have some backwater forum that's surprisingly still active, YouTube channels with less than 20,000 subs, or some Discord server for some really obscure fandoms, so like really small things. And I've been a part of all of these, and I've been part of all these when they get bigger too. And there is definitely something lost. I mean, a lot of people make jokes about something becoming mainstream and they lose all of what they had before, but I think something is definitely lost when something becomes mainstream, right? And I think nowadays in our waking life in real world, our social bonds are increasingly more atomized. We go to work with separate people than we live with, and then we don't see those people at work after work, right? And our community ties are increasingly breaking down. There's no like community hub anymore. And so in this age, the internet provides an escape, an outlet, or even sometimes a replacement for the social connections that we are beginning to lack on this wider scale. Um, and so the reason I bring up this fascinating dichotomy with the internet, so there's, imagine the internet played a large role in atomizing our society, but it also provided the opportunity for incredible communities to have been formed that would never have formed in the waking world. And so I don't think it's fair to shove the deconstruction of communal society onto the internet solely, because the internet started out as like a refuge, a safe place for those who had no place in modern society. And you look at societal factors like rise of suburbs, shopping malls, a more like specialized workforce, that all played roles into distancing us in everyday life from our peers. So I think the appeal of the early internet is definitely this. There's this outside force that wasn't present there, but once it did, and it always does. Once it finds its way into the net, its atomizing power actually is stronger, I believe, in the internet than it is in the outside world, leading to the society nowadays, which is even more disconnected than that we see now. And so this is why I would love to just live in the internet of, the early 2000s. Just like live in it and like let it and not let it go on. Just live in that one moment where there were these small internet communities that was just everywhere. That's just how it felt everywhere. Instead of nowadays where you have this isolated group, which is like separate from everything. People spend so much time, so on these small communities that we have nowadays, which have a small number of members, people spend much time on them, and so much happens. So much culture forms out of it that's really interesting, because you can have like 100 people, but there's such a distinct feeling that comes from it. And I'm sure anyone who's been on like a small Discord server can attest to this and understand how there's so much history and drama to this one like online place. And there's a communal bond that comes with it, and that no one else can really understand. And of course, Discord is a bit different. It's a larger entity, but smaller forum boards and apps can have much variation in online culture that is also really fascinating to observe or to partake in. Right? I joined this app. It's called Amino. It had several hundreds of mini communities on it, and being part of such a smaller community like that, where the norms and behaviors of the users are so different from other communities, you do sort of feel like you're getting sucked into some alternate world in each community that you go into. Modern day life takes place on this global scale, so it feels wrong. Something's wrong to be living on such a small scale, small place. But historically, like this is what we're used to, right? Living and dying in the same village, in the same tribe. This is normal. So it's normal to kind of strive for something like that, I think. But even these small communities on the wider internet scope, they themselves become atomized from everything else. That I think a good analogy to describe them is that they're kind of like prisons, rather than community nowadays. And the difference between a prison and a community is that a prison is something that is not self-sufficient, and it does not reflect favorably on like connecting with the outside world. It's not built for that sort of thing. Community develops traits within the individual which allow for further connection on a wider societal scale. Well, that trait's developed when someone is in a prison. It's an isolated online community. It allows you to connect with a small group of like-minded individuals while disconnecting you from everyone else that is outside of where you are. So I think it really is about scope, like these true online communities, the ones that we would have in the early 2000s. These are you don't only have the rejects of broader society, but they're rejected by the broader internet scape as well. They live in like the shadow of the larger web nowadays, opposed to what we would have had before. And I've spent some considerable time in such communities, and every time I do, I find it incredibly enticing to spend more and more time in this community, in this place. It feels so comfortable, almost too comfortable, and I think it really does consume. Like it's like this whirlpool. The longer I stay in this community, the more my overall sense for community will be satisfied, but the more disconnected I will be from everyday life. The longer I stay in this community, it becomes really apparent, right? Everyday life that is not online. And choosing to leave these communities, which I've done every time I've joined one, I feel like, no, I have to get out of this. Every time I leave, it feels like you're waking from the most beautiful dream, right? A night spent, you have the most wonderful like fantasies and entire life lived while the rest of the world was asleep. You have memories of all these people, these experiences and lessons that only you can understand. And it is bittersweet when you wake from such a dream. There's no one you can find in waking life with whom if you share these experiences with, they would truly understand, right? I mean, the sweetness of the bittersweet, though, comes as a sigh of relief, of re-entering into a world in which such borders do not exist, where every existing moment is in a reality which is alongside tangible individuals, where experiences are permanent and your memories are more than just a nostalgic story, right? Instead, they guide you, they mold you, and you can live beyond yourself in the real world. You share your life among a living, breathing community who can use the lessons therein to guide them as well, rather than these such memories remaining in the prison of your own mind, hiding away in a cell which only you can enter.